You're listening to Criticaleye's Inspiring Leaders podcast. Criticaleye is a global membership community with over 2 decades of experience supporting senior executives in their roles. We work with board-level executives, giving them opportunities to build their knowledge, skills, and access independent reference points outside of their immediate networks. Whether you're stepping up into a more senior role or aspiring to do so, looking to hone high-level stakeholder relationships, drive operational performance, build your own personal resilience as a leader, or have longer-term career goals such as moving into a plural career, Criticaleye's approach supports a range of leadership challenges and ambitions.
Hello, my name is Julia Brook, Marketing Communications Director at Criticaleye. I'm very happy to be hosting this podcast, which is part of our Inspiring Leaders podcast series. In this episode, we're going to be exploring how to succeed as a first-time chair. Joining me on today's episode, we've got Brian Hayes. Brian is chair of Bank of Montreal Europe plc and also Booking Holdings Financial Services International Limited. He's also one of our Criticaleye board mentors. We also have Elisabeth Stheeman. Elisabeth is also one of our Criticaleye board mentors, but she also chairs the Edinburgh Investment Trust plc alongside a wide portfolio of NED roles. So thanks very much for joining us, Elisabeth.
It's a pleasure.
So taking on a first-time chair role is fraught with challenges, fraught with obstacles, and can also be tricky to achieve. It'd be great to start with you, Elisabeth. What are your initial thoughts on what it means to succeed as a first-time chair? What are those initial hurdles as well as the opportunities?
I found being a first-time chair actually a rewarding experience. So one was getting to know all the different stakeholders, whether that was board colleagues, the executive team, shareholders, advisors. And after a year, 2 years, you realize whether actually you've done a good job or where there are areas you might want to tweak. And obviously the role of the SID, the Senior Independent Director, is really important because they give you feedback and they will tell you whether there's any areas where your board colleagues feel you should be doing another job. And I always felt it's really important to get really good, broad feedback from all different stakeholders. I didn't set up to become a chair. I actually wanted the SID role. And when I spoke to the SID about it, the SID said, actually, we'd like you to go for the chair. And I had this sort of moment of, really? Do I really want to do this? And then I thought, actually, I'll be brave. There are not enough female chairs around, especially our FTSE listed companies. And I can't be one of them, or one of the people who says we should have more female chairs of FTSE 350 companies and then not step up to the plate. So I thought, I'll give it a go. Having said that, I also wanted them to make absolutely sure it was going to be a success. And so that's why I spoke to other chairs who either had been in role for a long time or who might have been first-time chairs, who were chairing similar companies, who were chairing different companies, and really just learn from them. And I found that incredibly useful.
Have you enjoyed your chair roles?
Yes, for the most part. I mean, like with all roles, there are some parts of the role you enjoy more than others. Having said that, with hindsight, I'm so glad I sort of jumped at it. And even though I had to be sort of dragged a little bit initially, just to sort of make the decision. But I'm really glad I did, because I do think it gives you responsibility. It gives you the opportunity to interact with lots of different people. Now, I happen to be quite an extrovert person, so I do like interacting with all kinds of different people. I really enjoy meeting shareholders. I really enjoy interacting with the executive team, with advisors. So I do think it helps if you're very open-minded.
Brilliant, thank you. We'll probably explore that a bit more as the episode goes on. Brian, if I can come to you, thanks for joining us again. It'd be great to get your insights into your journey to the chair role and your journey since you become a chair. How have you personally dealt with the challenges and opportunities that you've had in the role?
Yeah, well, I can identify with a lot of what Elisabeth said. I think that resonates with me. Like from my point of view, when I finished my executive career, I felt that I had expertise to bring to the table, not just in terms of the technical expertise, but also, I guess, the other aspects of the way I think about people and humans and how they interact, and that empathy that's important in organizations to get the best out of people, to understand where they're coming from and to understand their ambitions. So I felt, I'm possibly using the word vocation, but in a way I felt it was a vocation for me. So I didn't go actively seeking it. When I finished my executive career, I was approached and not to be a chair, but to join a board of a bank, and it seemed like an interesting, easy step forward. And one thing leads to another. Your network of people, not necessarily the people that are the recruiting agencies or the headhunters, it's really your network, and I have a good network, so people, my credentials, I guess, or what people felt about me was out there. But I'd say the hurdles, because I think that's what a word you use, which I think is a very good word. Everything is underpinned by trust in life. People when a new chair comes in want to know that they can trust them, and managing the expectations that you think the role is going to have is really important as you're building that trust. People will expect one thing, but you need to be clear in the communication to manage that trust. But on the other hand, it is an opportunity to really influence the tone and culture in an organization. Culture, I'll say that word 3 times. It's such an important component of the lifeblood of an organization. We get the culture right, everything else starts to at least have a chance of falling into position. You've got the ability as a chair to empower others, so that appeals to me. I don't need to take the credit. I don't need to be called a chair. So I think those characteristics are really helpful. But you can also get the benefits of influencing and driving change. So to me, that's what appealed to me. So my journey almost like. It almost like it was like a magnet. I got pulled into it opposed to me looking for it, and I clearly, a few things I learned, for what it's worth, was listening to people is important. I don't mean hearing what they say. I mean really listening and really, writing it down a few times and saying, okay, I understand where you're coming from, whether you're a senior executive or the CEO or whatever. And obviously being organised and it's a bit like a CEO. It's also a lonely place, so it's important to seek guidance, have your own mentors, whether they're senior people from industry, other industries, or also reverse mentors, and encourage people that have very diverse, different backgrounds to you. And I think they're the sort of components of success and the hurdles and the opportunities to exploit. And also just be clear in your communication, be natural, just be yourself. That's what I found. I'm not trying to put a label on me and walk in with a big fancy suit. I'm trying to say we're here to really, build a relationship and balance the operations.
You mentioned trust, and I think trust has to be earned. You don't achieve it overnight. How do you go about achieving that goal?
Where things are equal, in a sense, when we are transparent and honest, and people feel like they're a partner to you, then you earn trust. So if you're transparent and honest, I think if you listen actively and people see that you're listening, with an intensity, that you're really interested in what they're saying, you can't fake it. You have to be authentic. I think you gain trust if people know what is expected of them and what they expect of you. So there's a clear expectation component to it. If people feel that you are prepared to not be a grabber of power, but rather to empower the people that work in the organisation to not just I don't just mean now the executive team, but a sense of the tone is that everybody, whether you're the youngest new teenage joinee to the oldest executive, have a chance to influence and bring something to bear.
Elisabeth, could I come back to you, and perhaps you could move on a bit from the whole trust area? Taking on a new chair role, and particularly your first chair role, how do you know what your style is going to be as a chair? And how do you impart that style on the board and set the tone for how it's going to be under your tenure?
Yeah, I think that's a very sort of personal choice, or often personal development, where it might evolve over time. I certainly felt there were certain chairs I had seen operate over the previous 8 years or so. So I've done a portfolio career for 10 years, been a chair actually for almost 3 now. And I knew what I did not want to be like. So to give you an example, I was on a board fairly early in my portfolio career where the chair was very autocratic. He decided without asking other board members who the SID should be, and appointed his previous finance director as the chair of the audit committee, which under corporate governance wasn't exactly the thing to do. So I knew that's not how I would operate. And when, for example, it came to me to appoint a new SID, and I spoke to the previous SID, the previous SID said, you can do what you like. You can choose whoever you like. I said, that's not me. So I want to, at the very least, go through process where I sort of think it through. And anyway, so we went through a process of thinking about who would make sense, having conversations. So I would call my style probably sort of more collaborative than I've seen with others, ensuring you sort of bring people along in the conversation. At the same time, you realize as a chair, ultimately, the buck stops with you, so to speak. So you've got to take the decision. You've got to, whether it's with shareholders or others, you've got to stand up for it. Finding the right balance between taking the decision but ensuring the rest of the board comes along, to me, was really important.
And when taking on a new chair role, there's always that period of discovery when you're setting the tone, but also assessing your board, that they're going to be fit for purpose for what lies ahead. And that can result in people being dropped off of the board or removed, perhaps executive team changes as well. In that first chair role, how do you approach that? Because I imagine it requires a lot of courage in the first instance to have the voice, make those decisions. Can you talk us through any instances of that?
Yeah, Brian talked about listening, which I agree with is very, very important. Listening, observing. So I think it's important. I learned from one of the chairs I worked with, or I was on the board with, that this chair said to me, make sure you're not the first one to speak. So you first observe, you listen, and perhaps you speak last. And I would use the same example when you look at the board and you sort of assess their capabilities. So certainly that's perhaps more my style, that I would sort of first really take time to assess and also give people the chance. And perhaps they may have been put in a role where actually they're not as effective as if you actually let them do something where they're really good at. So perhaps you might move roles around a bit. So say whether it's about chairing a committee or put them in charge of something. Because some people actually shine when you give them responsibility. Obviously, if all that doesn't work, with some mentoring, with sort of reassigning responsibilities, sometimes there may need to be hard decisions.
Yeah, and I would actually echo that as well, Elisabeth. I mean, again, listening, being at the forefront of what you said, it's really important characteristic, and observing, that ethnography, what are people doing, what's their body language in the meeting. And I think by doing that and by having the assessment of the skills that the people have, which is hardcore evidence by the data, I guess, but also then you'll find out additional information and unexpected insights from the one-on-ones that you have with the individual directors. That's really interesting. The way the body language is, the way they express their language, the way they argue things. I think that's important. So it really, to some extent, is an assessment of the dynamics. Like all those components are what the dynamics are, and out of that, then it really, then you decide, is there a need for change? Maybe there isn't a need for change, or maybe change can happen without a nuclear change, but maybe not.
Obviously, you might ask for a board evaluation. And obviously, for publicly listed boards, that's something you would do as an external board evaluation at least every 3 years anyway. So on the board I chaired, we decided to sort of the first, I think it was after 6 months after I came in, we did an internal evaluation and then we did an external one afterwards. And I found that incredibly useful because it's an external party who will have conversations with board members. Sometimes, obviously, it might just be a written report, but I think that can be quite good because you have sort of somebody objective who provide some feedback. And also, board members may say something to that third person more freely than they might say, whether to the chair, to the SID, or anyone else.
Something I've become more aware of recently, and perhaps something you don't hear about often enough, is the board being referred to as a team. But they are a team, and I'd be keen to get both of your views on how you create a team environment within the board.
Incredibly important. Somebody once to me referred the chair as being a conductor. I love music, and I think that's so true. So making sure when somebody has to sort of play really loudly or very quietly, or when you need to bring them in, get them out of their sort of little hole when they sort of been hiding. That's obviously really has been interesting also through the COVID period, when it was sort of, you didn't always get together in person, and making sure everybody has a voice. That's incredibly important. We were earlier having the session on active shareholders and how you can work well together as a board, getting to know them as a person. So having, whether it's dinner, as a group, sort of meeting them individually, having a drink, also understanding what goes on in their lives. So do they have certain interests? Do they have family? Do they love sports or not? Somebody referred earlier, I think, on the panel about going to board dinner, was the only conversation was about football. Oh yeah, that's happened to me. And I was sitting there, it was a local football team I had no idea about. So just also being sensitive and making them feel welcome. I mean, having diversity without inclusion is a completely lost cause. So you might say, oh, there we finally have the first racially diverse person or the first woman. But then if you make them feel like the odd one out, or I've ticked the box because now I have one person, that's not going to make it successful.
Brian, what do you think?
I just totally agree. And I'd add a few things. What runs through engaging with a board is the word respect. So, we're all human beings. So it's very, very important to maintain respect regardless of when you're assembling a team and you feel that some players, using the football analogy, may need to be stepped down or others stepped up. Really maintaining respect for individual members and for existing members is really important, because what you're trying to do here, we get back to it, is create a positive culture and also a positive story of the person stepping down from the board, or the person who's joined, that you're dealt with respectfully. We all know when we're involved in a shop or buying something, or a consumer, you like to be treated with respect if you're bringing back something, or if someone's selling you something, and I think that carries through to the boardroom. And at the end of the day, in assembling a team and the appropriate team, you're looking for a clear set of talents, people who are curious. I think we all like that word. People that have critical thinking in their caliber, that are prepared to really extract the value, the unexpected value from the organisation. Perhaps that's the way I could describe it.
Looking a bit more into the insular part of being a chair, and it's often said it's quite a lonely role, similar to being a CEO. What can you do to keep connected and keep your reference points expanding as a chair, bearing in mind the potential isolation that could come in? Brian, can I come to you first on that?
Yeah, well, I suppose another way to describe that is I think the word collaboration is very important in today's world. So you need to know where you can get source information, how you can collaborate with others to deliver that information to you. So really, the source of information is a bit like that in a way. You could describe it like that, and even you could say that those source of information are quasi stakeholders. You might say, they may be partners, or they may be other suppliers, or they may internally or externally. So I think what's a very useful tool or technique for any stakeholder, and indeed for such as you prompted there, trying to get your information, is to map out like you would do in a stakeholder map. What is important to know? What do I want to know, and who can influence me obtaining that information, or the board obtaining that information? So map it out in the same way as you'd map out a shareholder set of stakeholders. That's the way I think about it. And then then it's about figuring out what that relationship would look like and what the communication plan is. Is it digital, or is it personal, or is it different types of insights you would get? And and build that relationship. That would be my reaction to that thought.
Yeah, I would add to that, build your network and have a group of people who you can talk to, especially when there's a difficult situation. So I don't sort of keep it as a list, but I sort of know a number of people I would be able to speak to if I'm in a difficult situation, if I'm not quite sure what to do, who I could turn to just ask for advice. So I think that's incredibly important. And obviously, programs such as the Criticaleye Chair Ready program is brilliant because firstly, it gives you sort of the tools of the trade, so to speak, to line it, but also it gives you a network of others who either are already chairs, who might become chairs, and I've certainly found it incredibly helpful to be in situations where now there are others to turn to. So I actively try to build networks of people who are either chairing other companies, chairing companies in the similar industry, and growing that network. And sometimes even just talking to somebody, even if you might not take the decision they say you should be taking, it's you talk to 5 people, you get 6 opinions. Okay, in the end, you take your own decision. So
sometimes networking can be a daunting word for people. So I think it's important to say it's not.
Yeah.
It just requires a bit of thought beforehand and thinking about why am I doing this? Will I enjoy it? And who is it I want to speak to? And what is it I want to get from that network? I
almost wouldn't call it networking. I would call it relationship building.
That's even better word.
And to me, it's also friendship. Frankly, because a lot of these people over the years become friends and you interact with in different settings. So that's really important. And also makes it more fun, frankly.
I think so far we've spoken a lot about the nice parts of being a chair. But of course, in the role of chair, should crisis or conflict occur, you have to be ready to react and react very fast in today's market. As a first-time chair, how can you be prepared for any potential crisis? And I know that's quite a broad question, but it'd be really good to get your thoughts on how you personally have built the resilience needed to cope with a potential crisis. Brian, perhaps I could come to you first.
It depends on the organisation you go to, first of all, how sophisticated and what they have in place, but there either is or isn't a crisis management plan. You might say, well, there's a plan, but do people run to the plan when the crisis arises? So there's a few things I'd say about it that's really important. I suppose ground rules is that it's really important, and we spoke about relationships there a minute ago. It's really important that the existing relationships within the organisation are already robust. You know, that foundation of the communication between chair, CEO, CFO, or whoever it might be, different executives, that people know what the series, who's going to communicate with who if something were to happen, in relation to an event, and in a way, part of that then, from a chair's point of view, is to ensure that the board is involved, and not only is the board involved, but there is agility and timeliness in the communication with the board. I'm big on that one. The board needs to be informed early, particularly as it pertains to regulated industries. So having a strong communication strategy, and if there is a crisis management plan, then there'll be steps to follow within that. But that's a core component of a resilient culture and organisation, to expect the unexpected.
Elisabeth, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say be on the front foot, be prepared. Sometimes, obviously, sort of play a quote-unquote war game, whether it was for a cyber attack. We obviously earlier spoke about the activist scenario, that how you would react, how the rest of the board would react, how you would work with advisors, with different stakeholders. So it doesn't come as a surprise. That to me is almost the most important. So nothing should be a surprise. So that when and if it happens, and take cyber as an example, it's not a question when it happens. It's it's not a question if it happens. It's a question when it happens. And I've actually recently been in a situation when one of the boards I'm involved with had a cyber attack, and it was incredibly interesting for me just to sort of see how the communication plan worked out. And actually, I was really impressed because I always felt I was really, really well informed. The clients were really well informed. They were very clear, talking points. It's not an easy thing to do. And with hindsight, it's always easy to say what went well and what didn't go so well. Yeah. Having said that, it's always much better to have a plan and to be prepared than just sort of try to pretend you can just sort of have a go.
And I think like the word resilience creeps up over and over again now, as we all know. It's in the common parle. It is a component of financial and operational resilience that you have a crisis management contingency plan. And so it would be unusual to go on a board unless it's a very new company that may not have at least the bones of how that would work and how the communication would work and how the crisis would be managed. And war rooms, great, they work very effectively. They're not always possible in every organisation.
Well, look, it'd be great to get a couple of final comments or pieces of advice from you both for people who are either in their first chair role or looking for the first opportunity. What advice would you give to put them on the path to success in that role? Brian? It's
really important to understand the big picture. You got to know what the place looks like, what's in the organisation, what's not in the organisation, what the vision strategy is. It's important to know that. So you can't have your brief unless you know the components of what it is. I think we said it during this discussion as well. We touched on it briefly. I think relationship between the chair and the CEO. Figure out if you can work with this person, how you're going to work with this person, if you can trust each other in every sense of the word, not just a business sense, but also in an emotional sense, I think. And develop a strategic mindset would be the other thing I'd say, in terms of the board is yes, we're concerned with short-term performance, but it's also about what does the end game look like. And I think a very good technique and tool that I've found is very valuable is, rather than reading the strategic plan, have people envisage and live in the future like was today, and try to get a team together and do that and say, okay, we're not in 2025, we're now in 2028. What does that look like for everybody? And it's just an interesting, it's a sort of strategic mindset, I suppose, long versus short term.
Elisabeth, how about you?
I think it's a good thing to do quite a bit of due diligence before taking on the role, because the worst you can do is take on the wrong role, whether that's as an ed or as a chair, but even more so as a chair. So completely agree with Brian regarding the relationship with the CEO. Talk to other chairs, whether in the same industry, perhaps chairs who'd chaired the same company before. That's something I did, just to sort of get a little bit the history of the company, how it's changed. I always think you don't have all the answers, so get advice from others. Nobody's perfect. And then be prepared to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes along the way, and that's sometimes the best way to learn. But be humble. And when you make mistakes, own up to them and say, okay, how can we learn from this, or how can I learn from it, and how can we avoid doing them next time?
Thank you so much, Brian and Elisabeth, for sharing your experiences as chairs with our listeners today. Great to dive into that topic a bit more with both of you. The Criticaleye Inspiring Leaders podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so please subscribe and look out for future episodes. For more on how we support leaders and our tailored programmes for senior executives and non-executives, please visit our website at www.criticaleye.com. Thanks very much, Brian, Elisabeth, and I hope to see you on a future episode soon.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Bye.